Good morning, everyone. I would like to start the seminar with just giving a short prayer. Then afterwards, I would do the national anthem, and then we may proceed. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have given us. We thank you that we woke up this morning. It was not by our might nor our power. We thank you that you've blessed us with everything that we have, and we thank you that you've allowed us to come together to this seminar. We ask that you be with us. We ask that you bless us. We ask that you give us everything or every information that we require, and we shall gather as we are together. We ask all this in the name and in the blood of Jesus Christ. Amen. Nkosi sikeleli Afrika, maluphakanyiswa uphondo lwayo, izwa imithandazo yethu, Nkosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo, murena buluka sitjhaba saheso, ufedise dintwa matshwenyego, usibuluke sibuluke sitjhaba sa heso, sitjhaba sa South Africa, South Africa. Ediblo fanon seyemel, edidib de fanon se. Oron sievergebergtes, wat die blose advotief, that the courts come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, oh land.
Durban is missing you. Let's take this time to recharge. Durban is waiting to welcome you. Be energized by the ocean, beach, and bush. Discover Durban's adventures and tranquility. Play on the promenade and put the fun back in your life. Enjoy a township experience. Do the Inanda Heritage Trail. Explore Durban's cultural diversity. Stay safe and plan to create new memories. Visit Durban online. Durban's warm hospitality awaits you.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, across the world, wherever you are tuning into, and welcome to a very first of its kind. It is indeed a warm welcome from the sunny shores of KwaZulu-Natal in sunny South Africa. Good morning, beautiful people. Excuse me for not having the beautiful background for the conference. My technical team is working on it. They're definitely going to have it before you know it. I just want to follow protocol and thank our wonderful lady, Mabtelezi, for opening up with that national anthem and that prayer. Hopefully, we're going to have a wonderful time. It's going to be a whole 2.5 days of conferencing. We're going to learn, we're going to be empowered, we're going to be inspired. And as you are joining in, don't mind opening the video. We want to see your beautiful faces, beautiful people. All right, man, welcome to it. It is indeed the World Town Planning Day Conference, which is a webinar this time around. It is an opportunity to unite planners and celebrate planning around the globe. We would like to welcome everybody joining us from all over the world. Greetings to all of you, wherever you are. Right now in our South African time, it says to us, it is 10 minutes after the hour of 10 a.m. Wherever you are joining us, I want to greet you in your own time zone. You are very much appreciated. Greetings to the honorable guests attending as you are tuning in, beautiful people. Greetings to all the speakers, the panelists, the facilitators who are going to be facilitating some of the panel discussions and some of our chat rooms. A special greetings to all the stakeholders. Man, this was never going to be able to be a success without you. Also, greetings to our honorable mayor who was supposed to be with us, but due to other commitment, he could not be with us, Councillor Mxolisi Kawunde. And I just want to say to you, welcome to the World Planning Day webinar. I will be your host for the next 2.5 days. My name is Fortune Kwanyana. I'm an international motivational speaker and a business speaker. But here, I'm going to be facilitating this session. All right, man, the theme of the conference, it has been themed the paradox of planning into implementation across the globe. Here's the thing, we are going through right now what we call COVID-19, which we have seen to be one of the most difficult times. I just want to check if you are okay. Good morning to you. If you are greeting me back, will you just raise your hand and do like this? Are you guys good? If you are good, just do like this. All right, awesome. I want to know in your screen right now, you know, in your screen, people are all over the place. One person may be here for me, another one may be there for you. I want you to point out in your screen that where I am situated. In your screen, just point out. If it's up, point up. If it's this side, you point down. In your screen, let's try that. Let's take a minute and do that. I want to see if you can see me. Just point your finger like this, the side where I am in your screen. I see people are pointing like 3 directions at the same time. Guys, what's happening? Man, oh man. All right, I just want to go through a few of our house rules. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I know this is supposed to be a very complex conversation, but we're going to be having a little bit of fun. We're going to laugh here and there so that you don't get bored wherever you are tuning in the world. All right, I'd like us to observe some of the house rules. Like every other conference and meetings, we've got rules and etiquettes that we need to follow, which we need to adhere to. And rule number 1 is make sure that you're muted at all time. This helps us avoid and minimize the noises in the background, especially when speakers are speaking, and also to our presenters and speakers. When you are speaking, kindly make sure that the people in the room, or if you are in the office, try and close the door and make sure there is no noise so that your presentation is heard properly across to everybody. Number 2, position your camera properly. It's very awkward when you see someone's camera like this, you know? You just want to try and make sure that your camera is well positioned. We can see your beautiful face, and I can see all of you guys are looking beautiful, bright and early in the morning. All right, number 3, avoid multitasking. I know, guys, we are busy. Some of us are in the office. Some of us are busy at home doing whatever that we are doing. But please try and minimize the multitasking, and by all means, focus on the conference happening right here. Number 3, to all the speakers, a special ask from me. Please try by all means to prepare all your material in advance. Before you present, get all your material organized and make sure you have all the things you will be needing for your presentation. And then the other one that I've come to realize from other conferences that I've had to chair and host and facilitate, people eating during the conference. I know, guys, I hope you've had your breakfast. If you've had your breakfast, just do this. Okay, it seems like a lot of you guys are not breakfast people. Are we going to have a problem with you trying to eat during the conference? All right, so please, let's try, guys, avoid, I know some of our speakers would want to, have a sip on water. We would try by all means, if you have to, you can have your sip of water, but avoid drinking coffee or drinking whatever you want to drink at this time. Just focus on the conference at hand. Also, the last one, if you need to use the lavatory or the toilet, please make sure you switch your camera off and then you leave. I once had a conference where a lady decided to just stand up and went to the loo and everybody could see, and it was so embarrassing. So please, guys, let us make sure that we follow these simple rules. There are other many important rules, but all I'm going to say now is treat this meeting as though you would treat any other meeting you would be gone to if you are meeting someone in person. The truth is, we are live and we are living in a world that is full of disappointment, that is full of things happening in and around us that will stop us from jumping the hoop and going far. Just to set the tone of the conference, I want to remind you, I don't know how many of you know that during the Great Depression of 1929, that lasted a few years, do you know that the Americans were able to build the Empire State Building during the Great Depression? During this time, it was a tough time. Nobody was succeeding, but they were able to build a monument that till today, everybody wishes to see and visit. Also during this time, do you know that the San Francisco's, the Golden Gate Bridge was also built during the Great Depression? So you need to understand this. The paradox of this story that I'm telling you is, while everybody else is complaining about COVID-19, you, the planners, the urban designers, the people that construct the things that we marvel, we need to be on par. We cannot afford to lose the ball. In our very own Durban city, just now, during the COVID-19, we were able to build what we see as Africa's largest promenade. So to the city of Durban, I want to say salute, which means as planners, we've got what it takes to go beyond the extra mile. So to kickstart our program, very importantly, I want to hand over now to the Dean and Head of School of Built Environment and Development Studies at UKZN, Mr. Ernest, and I believe he is here. He will be giving us Professor Ernest. I'm sorry for that. Don't kill me. I have to get that one right. Professor Ernest Kalama, he will be the one giving us the first presentation. Good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me and you can see me. Good morning.
We can hear you very clearly, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Honored guests, colleagues in the planning fraternity, welcome on behalf of the University of KwaZulu-Natal. On behalf of our Vice Chancellor, Professor Nana Poku, our DVC, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, and the school leadership in the School of Built Environment and Development Studies at UKZN, which is a co-host of this World Planning Day 2020. I would like to welcome you all and give you greetings to a warm day in Durban, South Africa. I would like to also say that we have been part of this World Planning Day for a while now in partnership with both our local and our global partners. And those who have engaged with us, you know that our school is one of the best in the country. And our discipline of planning and town and regional planning is one of the best. And of course, as a dean, I always would put, we would always very proud of the work that the colleagues and our students do in the planning discipline at UKZN. But what I would like to emphasize today is just to say that we're here to learn. All of us, we're here to learn, and we are here to learn, and we're very, very excited indeed about the topics that we will engage with today, particularly some of the very, very important issues that we are all experiencing around the globe. Today's theme, the paradox of planning, implementation across the globe. We're looking forward to learning more about resilient cities, smart and sustainable cities. We are looking forward to learn more around inclusivity. How can we promote urban planning as a pertinent field of study and engagement, particularly during COVID-19. So with these few words, mine is very easy, just to welcome you on behalf of the university. But I would like all of you to enjoy this 2.5-day webinar. And I would like to recognize all the partners, ISOCAP, eThekwini Municipality, and all the departments that are involved with planning this event, SACPlan, SALGA, South African Cities Network, and of course, UKZN. If I forget any other partner, please forgive me. However, what I would like to emphasize is that we are all here to learn. We'd like to welcome you all. We recognize all the efforts that our volunteers and our sponsors have made for this day to be possible, and for us to all to give us this opportunity to engage. So with those few words, welcome colleagues. Let us go for it. This is the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor. We really appreciate that warm welcome to the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Welcome from the man himself. It was quite a warm one. Thank you very much for also keeping to the time. Also, to remind you, colleagues, it's very important that to those who will be presenting, keep to the time that is allocated. So I've got a bell here on my side. So if you go over the time, I will ring the bell and you will know that you are now in trouble. Man, oh man. Anyway, how are you guys doing? How are you holding up? Wherever you are in the world where you're hearing the sound of my voice, are you good? Just do this if you're good. The most important thing for these conversations is so that we have as much interaction as we can, so that we enjoy it and we have fun. Anyway, you know, everybody knows we are holding tight. We know in the United States, currently right now, the voting is going on and the counting is underway. I want to know from you, who is going for President Trump? Just raise your hand like this if you are President Trump. Yeah, I really hit a nerve right there. You don't want to show. Who's going for Joe Biden? Yeah, man, to anyone who is tuning in from the United States, we hope you did vote. Remember, it's very important that you make your vote count. Everywhere you are, it's very important that you do just that. All right, just moving on with our program. It's very important that I acknowledge all our stakeholders who have made this event possible. Yeah, man, because without them, it would not be possible. Especially a special thanks to the eThekwini Metro Municipality, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the South African Council of Planners, yes, SACPlan, the South African Cities Network, also the South African Local Government Association, which is SALGA, and the Municipalities Institute of Learning. We thank you very much for making sure that this day has been made possible, because without you, we would not have this day. Also, very importantly, moving on with our program, we want to also inform you that the International Society of City and Regional Planners has endorsed this event, the World Town Planning Day 2020, as a pre-Congress event for the 56th ISOCOP a virtual World Planning Congress on the post-oil cities. So the event that we are underway in, it is very much high level. So if you are thinking you are in a small event, I want to tell you, you are not. You are indeed part of a big event. Moving on with our program, we're going to accept our next speaker, and I'm hoping that he is ready to grace the platform as well. Moving on, our next speaker is Professor Pia Lawrence, who is from Poland, and Lawrence is an architect and an urban planner, a professor and a head of Department of Urban Design and Regional Planning faculty architect in Godnech University of Technology. Would you help me appreciate him as he's going to give us his presentation? As you are there, do clap and show in the screen that you are clapping for him as he comes to do his presentation. Well, greetings, Professor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's actually a double pleasure because as you may know, or some of you may not know, the International Society of City and Regional Planners actually is very active in South Africa. And we actually had a Congress in Durban a couple of years ago. So we know the place very, very, very well. And since that event, we started numerous other links to the eThekwini municipality and to other universities in the area, as well as to other entities with which we are actually working closely until now. So this is the moment when we are actually, to some extent, coming back and working with our friends and colleagues with whom we have met many years ago. And since that time, we are still friends. Well, as our host, our Mr. Fortune Kwanyana, sorry for my pronunciation, our program director mentioned in his opening speech, actually planners are necessary in, so to speak, surprising moments and surprising times. And this is a very interesting moment in our profession when we are actually required, when our services and help is required, not in the moment when everything goes well, but usually in the moment when everything goes wrong. So this is a kind of paradox and surprise, which actually we can see in our profession. So basically, we are sometimes even called doctors of cities, you know, not doctors in terms of people who are mastering things, but people who are helping to solve some kind of disease or some kind of problems or some kind of issues. And it may be, again, another surprise, but we are marching from one disease to another disease, from one problem to another problem. And this year it's a double surprise, I would say, because the topic of our Congress, and you can see in my background, is the postal city. But at the same time, we are actually starting to face the post-COVID city. So I would say we have double work to do to deal with the post-oil situation. And of course, we are still not fully in the post-oil realities, but we have to get ready for that. But also, we have to plan for the post-COVID city. So how to deal with planning, how to deal with urban development in realities of the post-COVID times. And we hope that we will live in the post-COVID times pretty soon. I know South Africa was hit pretty bad. Actually, Poland, where I'm from, was also right now is also right now suffering pretty bad. So basically, this is not the easy situation for any one of us. Even in the, you know, when they have this high growth rate and so on, you know, it's very bad. So basically, this post-COVID reality is not something which is safe for some of us. You know, it's basically for everyone. It doesn't matter where are you located. You may be facing these issues associated with that. So that means that the post-COVID reality will have to be planned globally, will have to be dealt with globally, and this is extremely important thing. But post-COVID is a new thing, you know. I mean, just a year ago, nobody of us would actually even realize that something like that is actually possible. You know, we were thinking that we are all safe in our developed countries, that our medical services will easily deal with any kind of issues. Right now, we know this is not that simple, and right now we know that so we have to deal with that, but also we have to get ready in terms of planning and in terms of future urban development model, how to deal with the results or with the consequences of pandemia. But also we have to know how to replan our cities in order to make those cities livable in times of any possible future pandemic. And now I would say the problem which might happen in future. Well, we all hope that COVID is a thing which is gonna end up soon and we will forget about that. But other people say, especially people from the medical sector, that this is just the first one in a row. So that means we have to get ready for the future events like this. And this is pretty important to actually understand that. The second thing which our this year's Congress is about is actually post-oil, which means that we are understanding that the natural resources we are using for generating energy for our cities, for our vehicles, for our houses, actually are limited, and they are supposed to be finished pretty soon. Well, you know, it's probably not next 5 years, but still we have to plan ahead, I would say. And in that case, the post-oil realities are also very important and are also extremely, I would say, necessary to be dealt with. And also we have to plan for the post-oil realities. So that means we have, I would say, double the reason to discuss the future of our cities. And as again, our program director mentioned in his kind introduction, we actually are having a Congress, which is right next week. And if you want to participate in the plenary session, you are more than welcome to do that. And also this is for the plenary session, it will be free of charge. So if anybody of you would be interested in participating in the plenary session to listen to the keynote presentations and other things, you are more than welcome to do that. I will be happy to transfer the proper registration link to our colleagues who are organizing this event, and I am I will be more than happy to actually if you do use this link for the pleasure of your participation. So, but as we discussed, this Post-Oil City Congress is a virtual Congress, of course, this year. But I would say, what would be the contents and what would be the issues which you might want to deal with when thinking about the new future planning, or when you are discussing this paradox of planning, as it's the title of this particular event. Well, as I said, planners are regarded as doctors of cities, but planners at the same time may be in conflict, and this is another paradox which we are facing in terms of planning. We have to understand that it's not always the case that planners have the one and only gospel to deliver, and in many cases they have conflicting ideas about how to deal with that. But again, these are planners who are discussing that. Just let me mention just the most classic conflict of all times, like the conflict between Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses in New York City in the 1960s, when they were actually fighting about the new model for the development of the city. But I would say probably there are many more conflicts and many more discussions like that, which actually help in understanding that planning is not always the gospel of one person, but basically in many cases it is the issue which has to be dealt with by many different people. So the same as we discuss about those different gospels, I would say, we can also discuss the different issues or the different topics. So let me refer to our Congress, and I'm doing that for two reasons, or actually for three reasons. The one reason is that, as we discussed, we are having an event which is the pre-Congress event, the official pre-Congress event, which I'm very happy about. The second reason is that we are really living in the times when we have to plan for the post-COVID realities and the post-oil realities. And the third reason is that our conference partners and conference hosts were kind enough to invite a larger representation of Isocarp, and I'm very happy to say that many of our international guests are the team members from our Congress. So many people whom you will listen and hear to during the next 2 days. These people are either just representing Isocarp, or they are actually regular team members. But what kind of topics they are dealing with, and what kind of topics the Congress will be dealing with? First of all, this will be about urban metabolism and how to understand urban metabolism, how to deal with cities which actually are being developed and who live to some extent like living organisms. The second issue is how to ensure economic diversity and resilience. We are speaking about the urban resilience, but frequently we are just discussing the issues associated with the climate change and so on. But what about economy? What about the economic diversity, and what about the resilience to other dangers which are happening not in the climate but in our economic life? The third thing is mobility and connectivity. How to plan for the connectivity within our cities, how to plan for the mobility, how to rethink the urban structure thanks to that, and how to deal with the modern ideas associated with putting different parts of the cities together. Then, how to deal with urban resilience as such, which means how to deal with the climate change issues and how to deal with all these environmental aspects which we are dealing with. Then, topic number 5, which will be discussed, is focusing on heritage and smart culture. I mean, we cannot forget where we are coming from, and we cannot forget what is our background and what we are dealing with. Then, topic number 6, which I think is also very important, is about creating healthy and inclusive urban environment. Well, nobody can question the issue of health, especially these days. But again, COVID is not the only thing which is in front of us. We have a number of the different, much more common, I would say, issues which we have to deal with. And these healthy and inclusive urban environments is something which every municipality is thinking about and every planner is thinking about. Then we are speaking about places for people. So we are speaking about shaping livable places, which is also the topic in our Congress. And this is the issue which is, I would say, on the planning agenda since 1970s, but it is still there, which means we still have a lot to deal with and a lot to do. And we cannot forget that this is still a big issue. And finally, last but not least, we are speaking about the cities which are already hot, not in terms of being interesting, but hot in terms of being under the pressure of the high temperatures for most of the year, for the most part of the year. And we have quite a few of the hot cities. And as we know, South Africa, which is a beautiful country, and the country I personally love and adore, is also to some extent the hot country, and some cities are also to some extent the hot cities. So the question is how to plan for the future of hot cities, especially in light of the climate change and so on. So as we can see, there is a number of the different issues which are not associated maybe with the very traditional planning workshop, not with the workshop of the urban designer or zoning planner, but which we have to deal with before we go to urban design or zoning plan. So these issues have to be dealt with, have to be included into our planning profession, and have to be understood as a part of the planning agenda. And many of them, as you could see, are falling under the category of the paradox of planning, because basically planning is not about, in this case, designing nice places only, although we love doing that. But this is also, but before most, it is about dealing with the complex urban situations, complex issues which are influencing the daily life of each and every one of us. And this is basically what our Congress, but also this conference is about all these paradoxes and issues which have to be considered and dealt with. And I do hope that that both this seminar, both this webinar, as well as the Congress, which is just starting in a couple of days from now, will be a perfect opportunity to discuss a number of those issues, that the results of that will be fruitful for each and every one of us, for our practice, for our research, for our day-to-day operations as the municipal administrators. And I just hope that the world will be better in the end. And I sincerely hope for that. And also my personal wish is that finally we will be able to come back to the places we love, to the places we adore. In my case, it is Durban. So thank you very much for inviting. And as I mentioned, I'll be happy to share the link for the Congress registration for each and everyone who is interested, but I will ask our Congress hosts to share that with each and every one of you. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't go beyond time. And well, this is what I wanted to start with. Thank you very much. You are muted.
Thank you very much, kind sir, for those warm, wise words. Indeed, without experts, we are unable to achieve maximum results and also some of the great things. We are looking forward to catching you also late in one of the rooms where you will unpack more in detail as to what you specialize in and how we can actually tackle this theme. We are going to be moving and soldiering on with program from SAC Plan. He is the SAC Plan chairperson, Mr. Africa. Will you help me appreciate and welcome him, and also welcome his presentation as he's going to inform us more about what and his presentation. Give him a round of applause, and I did ask to do just like this.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Nkwanyana, and good morning to everyone. Program Director, fellow organizers of this webinar, all delegates and guests in your different capacities, good morning. Indeed, I just would like to start by appreciating the platform that we are getting, and appreciating that indeed there is truth in this saying, in every dark cloud there's a silver lining. I mean, it is really on the backside of what we're going through as the world, a good fortune that we are able as professionals to come together and celebrate planning day the way we are, without being limited by our places of work and the countries we're coming from. So indeed the COVID-19 has catapulted the 4IR life, and we can now engage the way that we are engaging. You may allow me, Program Director, I will be more comfortable, especially with myself and yourself being out of order with the conference background, that I hide the video and then I can speak freely through the key points I want to share with the conference. So again, warmest greetings to everyone. Needless to say, as SAC Plan, we find such platforms such reflective engagements like this conference quite relevant, and more so the theme and the sub-themes, given the turbulent times we face today, just like the previous two speakers have indicated. It talks to our vision as the organization of transforming the mind, transforming the practice, the space and society. So I would like to open my input with something that will sound familiar with every one of us, from an article by Emad Kenawi, which reads, in Egypt, highly technical plans are drawn up, but nobody puts them into practice. They always end up gathering dust on the shelves of national agencies or local government without being utilized to make improvements to local economies or environmental well-being. Close quotes. I'm sure as this statement resonates with most planners in attendance to this webinar this morning, it is a common feeling, a common experience across the globe. The conference theme is quite wide, brings forth such a number of points of debate. With the few minutes I have, I won't try to touch everything that the 3 days will allow us, and the speakers that will be sharing in different rooms and plenary will allow us. I just want to share a few thoughts and things that we can take into the discussions that we are going to be having. One of the issues that seemingly bring us to planning implementation paradox is that on one hand, we have strategic and spatial planning that tends to be policy guideline for development direction for a locality. But on the other hand, maybe thirdly so, we have a land use management system that tends to be standalone, rigid in approach, and maintaining status quo, focus on maintaining the status quo rather than playing its actual role of supporting and ensuring that spatial and strategic planning ideas are realized on the ground. And saying this, we have to note that strategic plans contain well thought through and specific interventions that needs to be implemented, and if implemented, and especially as a package, will go a long way in changing the fortunes of a particular community or locality. Reality is though, colleagues, that projects get their life once they've gone through feasibility and preliminary design stages. And before that, they are merely ideas not ready for budget allocation. And before budget allocation, not ready for implementation. But certainly, as urban planners, we tend to conclude our plans with the projects list, and we are out of the system. And I think the best we've done is to have implementation framework contained in the plan, pointing to the structures and processes to ensure collaborative across professions implementation. But even when we do that, we should note firstly that such processes are outside the plan that we would have developed, and secondly, we ourselves don't plan to be leaders in the next process, and instead we hand it over to built environment professions, particularly the engineers. Now they take over, they give life to the project, and including scoping for the project and deciding what makes sense in the implementation dynamics they are facing, and this without the originator of the project. So I do think that some of the challenges that we end up having, it's because of this. We're naturally not trained the same, and therefore the projects will lose the essence. Its essence, its spirit will get lost because obviously the originator is not there. The second point I wanted to make is that of land use systems being silo in approach and rigid. We tend to see this as standalone and control rather than facilitating development. I think we always talk about this in the profession, that the disjuncture, though is so big, will bet it's from different professions, which I think it's something that we need to sooner rather than later face head on, because without this supposed to be a tool to ensure that the strategic plans, the spatial plans are reflected on the ground. It must ensure the regulations, the zoning in them reflects the direction that planners would have decided when doing the other plans. Now, having said this, and it's as if these challenges are not enough, we now facing the issues, for instance, of the pandemic that we're talking about, as well as your climate change, your fire, and so on. And on one hand, we have a problem that we have the struggle of our cities to be resilient despite the plans of these cities having reflecting these principles. I mean, the cities struggle to cope with the extreme weathers, for instance, like floods and droughts, struggle with climate change, struggle with pandemics such as the COVID-19 or Ebola, and so on. And it is not because they don't reflect these mitigating factors that are required. But plans that are produced have this philosophy of climate change and the issues that I've talked about. However, without the land use management systems and spatial planning.
Mr. Zulu, can I disrupt you, sir, for a minute?
Yes, sir.
We have people who are viewing from multiple platforms, also including our YouTube channel. They are complaining at the fact that they would wish to see you. I know you had made the move of switching off the camera solely to ensure that you get through audially properly. But can you try and please turn on the video, because we've got colleagues and guests that are tuned in via YouTube, and they had asked, can they please see the person who is presenting?
No problem. If I may then, because of
Thank
your time.
Thank you very much, sir. You can proceed now, sir.
Okay. Try to quickly move through this chair, program director. Then I was saying, then in addition to what we are having or we've listed, we now have the new challenges that we've raised. The challenges of the 4IR leading to the smart cities, and the challenges of the pandemic that is currently engulfing the world. Now, the first one, if we can take the smart cities and the 4IR movement is bringing pressure for transforming our cities to smart cities. We in quite a speed. And the question are we ready for it? Do we have necessary skills as planners to process these new kinds of developments? Are our land use systems ready to process, for instance, the Wi-Fi infrastructure requirements, the driverless cars, the drones requirements, less people owning private cars versus our, for instance, demands or requirements for parking as one example. So my submission is that the 4IR demands that we rethink our rules, we enclose gaps from both spatial as well as land use management processes, and sticking to what we are familiar with is not going to work. On COVID-19 program director, it's also we know that we have this engulfing the globe in 2020. All cities, all localities are therefore economically depressed. And since the outbreak, everywhere it's a struggle to survive. Somehow, planning requirements, processes that we have grown to be comfortable with, to be used to, all of a sudden, we've been challenged to think twice about them. So the response to the pressures of COVID-19 impacts in our economies had made it so glaring for everyone to understand that rigidly applying the planning standards risk totally destroying some of the economies in some of the areas. There is therefore pressure to rethink our planning rules such that the environment and urban form is still maintained, but at the same time give space for economic activities, lifeline. by reducing and in some instances removing the standard compliance requirements. And this has brought more home more than before the question does it have to take the pandemic? For instance, in our day-to-day operations in pre-COVID life, especially the third world, we have a serious unemployment issues. Is that not disaster enough? Does it not call for us that we rethink the standards we apply, the rules we apply to ensure that they are responsive and enabling the life of the citizens to be better, rather than making it difficult? Are we deliberately and insensitively being blind to reality that the societies are facing? So do these scheme controls per zone still making sense, or more land users should be allowed? Does it still make sense to have planning applications for some of the land uses, for instance, home businesses, and the categories that we cover there? This is the kind of out of the box and on your feet required in the disruptive planning that we are called to be. So let me conclude, Chair, without taking much of your time. And in concluding my submission is that it's more than before, we clearly need to, as town and regional planners, provide leadership and unashamedly so. We need to be in the forefront in understanding the mega trends and to deal with the crisis. We need to go back to the basics and to wholeheartedly embrace planning as key in society across sectors, be it public health, be it economy, be it infrastructure development. And by saying we provide leadership, I think we should underline that we are not saying we can do it on our own, but we should be providing the leadership. We need to work together as planning institutions and as practitioners in contextually informed but closealized spaces, places, and cultures. Program Director, with those reflective points, let me, on behalf of SEPTEN, wish everyone in advance happy Planners Day. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mnomzana Zulu. In Zulu, we say that if you're out in international waters, we're going to teach you a little bit of Zulu. You also owe us an opportunity to teach us a little bit of Polish if you're from Poland, also a little bit of Russian if you're from Russia. As the conference we were preparing with my team, we were looking at some of the phrases to try and greet in Russian. Whoa. Now I understand why Steve Harvey, when he came to South Africa with his show, he was struggling to pronounce names like Sipesihle Nkwanyana. If you're out in Poland, try and pronounce that name. That is my Zulu name, Sipesihle Nkwanyana. Try pronouncing it, don't bite your tongue in the process. Anyway, a very, very informative indeed presentation from the chairperson of the South African Council of Planners, Keta Zulu. Thank you very much, sir. You have indeed opened our minds and also pointed out some of the things that are very much troubling in our communities. You know, to know the fact that there is a plan of something that needs to be developed, but it never gets developed. That alone is worrying, and it's concerning to us as the officials and the experts behind the massive plans. All right, colleagues, what we're going to do now is we're going to be moving and soldiering on ahead with our program. We are very much on time, and I want to give a huge round of applause to our speakers. Can we give them a clap for just making sure they are keeping to their time? It shows really that when you are working with professionals and professors, you're guaranteed to get yourself the best thing. Anyway, wherever you are, I want to greet you again. You are live indeed on the one and only, first of its kind. It is indeed a blessing to have such a conference that is enabling us to have a conversation around the paradox of planning implementation across the globe. We have to remove boundaries. I believe if musicians in their own industry, they can remove the boundaries that have been put, we can also remove boundaries. We can work together hand in hand and build a powerful organization where we are one in sync and are able to touch the world at large. All right, moving on and soldiering on, what we will have next is a panel discussion. We're going to be looking at the 4 things that are major and important, actually 3 things that are major and very important to our conversation in this conference. Number 1 will be the 4IR, the 4th Industrial Revolution. It is true, never before we have had to be put in our offices and not gathered together. On any other year, we would have been gathered together in a conference, taking 5s, hugging one another, and enjoying the fact that we are meeting one another for the first time. So we need to talk about the 4IR. Also, we're going to talk about smart cities. We've heard in our very own country, our president talking about building a smart city, a first of its kind. We're going to talk about that as well in this panel discussion. Also, spatial planning. We're going to talk about that. So, but without further ado, allow me to introduce a lady of high note. Her name is Prashina Mohogi. She will be facilitating this conversation and this panel discussion for the next 45 minutes. And let us keep to time. Let us make sure that all our speakers are also keeping to time in the answering. Prashina is an advisor in the Built Environment and Planning Business Unit at the South African Local Government Association, known as SALGA, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And I'm going to be handing over to her. Good morning, Prashina.
Good morning, Fortune, and good morning to all our delegates from all over the world. I hope and trust that everybody is well. I want to take delegates through the very first session, which really is going to set the tone for the next 3 days. So the topic that we're looking at is the paradox of planning implementation across the globe. And like Fortune mentioned, we have 3 sub-themes that are going to be discussed and unpacked over the next 3 days. I mean, the first one is smart cities and the 4th Industrial Revolution. And then we're going to be looking at spatial planning across the globe, and then COVID-19 in planning. Before we get into the panel discussion, I want to take this opportunity to welcome, but also to introduce the panel members that are going to be joining us today in this facilitated session. The first panel member, colleagues, is Dr. Geshi Karuri Sabina. And I'm going to quickly read a little bit of bio of Dr. Sabina so that you know a little bit about her and the context that she's coming in. So Dr. Sabina has been the national organizer for the Civic Tech Innovation Network since 2018, as well as a visiting research fellow at the Wits School of Governance. She has a background in using tech and innovation to work with communities and is also a thought leader who is associated with the South African Cities Network. Her previous roles include being the executive manager for programs at the South African Cities Network, developing knowledge and evaluation systems for National Treasury's Neighborhood Development Program, managing research programs at the CSIR and the HSRC, and working as a technology associate at UCLA, Advanced Policy Institute. Her research interests span a range of development foresight, policy, planning, and practice, which are particularly related to urban governance, socio-technical systems, and innovation systems. She's also the co-editor of Innovation Africa book series and an associate editor on several journals on futures. Dr. Sabina holds a master's degree in urban planning and in architecture and design, both from UCLA, and she's got a PhD from the University of the Witwatersrand in planning and innovation systems. She's also a Archbishop Desmond Tutu Fellow and an alumni of the Urban Innovation Leadership Lab. Dr. Sabina, good morning and welcome to you. I want to introduce our next speaker in the panel. And our next speaker is Mr. Joe Ravitz. So Mr. Joe Ravitz is the leader on future-proof cities for the Manchester Urban Institute. He has worked on sustainable cities, environmental policy, economic development, and urban foresight system analysis, and is the co-director of the Center for Urban Resilience. From this, he developed the synergistics methods for working with collective urban intelligence in spatial planning, economic development, and policy systems. His main publications include City Region 2020, Environment and City, and the new Deeper City Collective Intelligence and the Pathways from Smart to Wise. He has advised policy in a range of government departments, and he's also a principal of SAMI Consulting, which deals with strategy and futures. Mr. Rabbit's current projects include global urban climate risk, urban policy, innovation, citizen science, and pandemic-related research. Mr. Joe Rabbits, good morning to you and welcome to the panel. Our next speaker is Mr. Ashraf Adam, a colleague who is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Bay Development Agency in Port Elizabeth here in South Africa. And Ashraf has had over 28 years of experience as a policy advisor, a senior manager, and a thought leader across various spheres of business and government. Before joining the Mandela Bay Development Agency, Mr. Adam was the Executive Director for Economic Development at the South African Local Government Association, where he was seconded for 7 months to the Development Agency, where he is now the CEO. And apart from urban renewal, the Development Agency is also responsible for the management of the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium and the Uitenhage Resources Center. Mr. Adam has obtained his bachelor's degree in history and political science from the University of Durban, and then he's got a master's degree in town and regional planning from the University of Natal. Since then, Mr. Adam has attended and contributed to various conferences and seminars across the globe, including the World Urban Forum. Colleagues, we are also meant to be joined today by Professor Marwala, but he has apologized and he will be joining us in the next 2 days or so. Panel members, before we get going and before we unpack this idea of the paradox of planning implementation across the globe, please allow me a few minutes just to contextualize and set a scene for some opening thoughts. So we've seen that the COVID-19 pandemic has provided planners with an opportunity to reassess and to rethink the manner in which we undertake planning, both at a national and a local level. We've seen environmental and sustainability matters being elevated in planning discourse. We've seen healthcare, infrastructure, even the use of public space being elevated in planning discourse. And when I'm saying this, I'm making reference to Central Park in New York City being used as a temporal medical facility for COVID-19. With a similar setup here in Durban and the use of public space, we have seen the critical need for leadership and decisive leadership at that, woke leadership that is needed and almost demanded by communities. We have seen the need for limited resources to be used to assist vulnerable groups. We have also seen the anxiety, the panic, the restlessness of communities and businesses trying to survive this pandemic. We have seen a great depth of empathy across all sectors. But more than that, we've seen and we are seeing a greater vocalization of communities speaking out against injustice in all its forms. Hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag #MeToo, hashtag climate justice are just some of the social movements that we've seen in the recent past that are trending on social media. And we now have a new cohort of communities that planning across the globe is servicing. And this cohort is not taking spatial planning lying down. There is a certain level of activism that has begun, which is forcing planners to do more, to think more, to act more, and of course, to plan better. Panel members, I want to hand over to you for some opening remarks before we get into a few critical questions that we would want to interrogate before we go into the discussions this afternoon, as well as tomorrow and Friday. Dr. Sabina, can I hand over to you for some opening remarks? Thank you.
Thank you, Prashina, and thank you to the conference and the conveners for having us. So, of course, I thought I would be making these inputs following Professor Marwala, so I was prepared to counter some of what I expected he was going to say, because I'm pretty sure he'd be speaking to us about the very important issues around the 4IR. But I think, be that as it may, I'm sure in the course of the next couple of days, we'll get to discuss those issues in depth. I think for me, in terms of leading remarks, I was quite intrigued by the theme of the conference and this idea of the paradox of planning. And I really took to heart, what does that mean, and began contemplating, what that was about. And I think the most important sort of angle on it that I took was, what's the purpose of paradox? What's the purpose of concerning ourselves with paradox? And one of the quotes I found was that it is really about arresting attention and provoking fresh thought. So I'm really hopeful that as we go through these conversations, that part of what we'll be exploring is this invitation and provocation of fresh thoughts. And for me, as I'll be sharing in greater depth tomorrow, the idea of paradox is very well embodied in the very notion of smart city. Because, what is smart city? Smart city is really a campaign that couples our normative ideals and imaginaries about the modern city with this propulsion into the fourth industrial revolution. So our president promises us a smart city, but I would suggest that the smart city is actually a paradox that I hope this conference can contribute to interrogating and to enrich, because who, after all, is making the city? Is it the planners and designers? Is it people? Is it capital? Or is it a whole set of complex processes that we struggle to engage with? When we talk about the technology, what technology or data, and whose is it? And for what purpose is it? What does smart mean? Is it intelligent and wise, or is it just fancy and shiny? Is it structural, or is it just a veneer? Can the smart city be inclusive? Can we afford to be smart? And there are all sorts of interesting conversations we can have about this. And it reminded me, as I was going down this line of thought, of a book that an author, Nanjala Nyabola, who's been to South Africa a couple of times, she's from Kenya. She wrote a book called Digital Democracy and Analog Politics a couple of years ago. And then I saw last week, actually, a conference that was coming up, also titled Analog Leadership in a Digital Generation. And this really got me wondering and thinking about our concern, maybe legitimately so, but also our obsession with the idea of digital transformation in our cities. Whereas I wonder sometimes whether we're stuck professionally and politically, in fact, in analog culture, developmentally speaking. And what does that mean? Well, we're told that analog culture probably is, if you want old school, it's supply-driven, it's hierarchical, it's task-oriented, it concerns itself with theories of constraints, focuses very much on trying to achieve stability and homogeneity. In fact, it's very much about planning and optimization, the things that many of us as planners are trained in, and we believe that should be the job. But we are then told that digital culture is more demand-driven, it's flat, it's agile, it's empowering, it's innovative, it's curiosity-driven, it's experimental. It's much more collaborative. It's about learning systems. And we all know these words. I'm sure they're very cliche for many of us. I'm glad we've got people like Joe, in fact, who are trying to make them more than just cliche and really trying to say that, what do these mean for our practice? Can we practice in ways that really breathe air into this idea that actually we need perhaps to be behaving digitally, not just concerning ourselves with digital stuff, which I feel sometimes we are. And so the question for us, I guess, would be which of these, the analog or the digital, better depicts our dominant planning culture, how we educate ourselves, how we practice, and therefore what is the issue around smart. And maybe just to conclude on these opening remarks, we were very lucky last month in South Africa to spend the month having a whole range of urban conversations in the course of the Urban Festival. And I was part of curating a series of conversations that we had around what we call the smarter cities. And it was really asking questions about some of these things. We very deliberately organized these conversations around a set of very non-tech themes. So the first one we had was around consciousness. So what are smarter cities in relation to consciousness? And I'm just going to give you a few quotes that came out of those conversations, and they're all online. Please do watch and listen. So one was the idea that on the one hand, there's this intense potential of technology to positively transform life. And we know this, and we heard a whole litany of these technologies and what they could do to wonderfully change things. But on the other hand, there were these very insidious concerns about privatization and commodification of our futures. There was a wonderful quote from Roy Amara, who's the current head of the Institute for the Future, who says that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run, but then to underestimate it in the long run. What does that mean for us in how we think about the city? In the consciousness conversation, we went into a whole consideration of maybe the fifth industrial revolution that people are already talking about, which is actually not just about the technology and the machines, but also about the human and the role of the human in this, is perhaps where we need to invest some time, that it needs to be less about things and more about people. The second conversation was about imagination. And there I'll just give you a quote. So Russell Hlongwane, who's a local filmmaker, in fact, he's from KZN, so props to KwaZulu-Natal, says that, he asks the question, can we converge the algorithmic and the sacred, the scientific and the mythical, as a means to propose an inclusive lexicon of technology and the future? It was beautiful, and he's made a beautiful movie called The Dark Cloud that really begins to explore in a very Afrofuturist way these questions about, do we want to continue seeing technology as separate from us and seeing it as something that just disrupts us with no interaction, no ownership, no embeddedness. And then maybe the last one I'll mention was the conversation around participation, where there was a wonderful quote from a young techie from Cameroon, Derek Demeveng, who said, smart cities in an African context require intelligent planning and an active citizenry, rather than merely an overlay of technological solutions more applicable to international markets elsewhere. And again, I think quite a powerful commentary on the idea that smart cities, perhaps in our context, yes, are about more effective services and sustainable growth, but also have to be about this direct relationship with people, with the citizens, with who we are actually talking about. So I hope as we carry on the conversation, we'll look into what smart really means for us, and perhaps it is partly about technology, but more than just about technology-based solutions to making cities, and perhaps about how we can use tech to contribute creatively, maybe even experimentally, in addressing really serious issues, not just for the few, but for the many. So this word inclusion. I'll just pause there, but really looking forward to the conversations these 2 days.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sabina. So much to digest. So many things that you talk about has been some of the stuff that we've been discussing in the planning fraternity here in South Africa over the past months. I mean, consciousness, such a key factor. And how do you merge consciousness with an algorithm? What is smart and whose city is it? And the minute you start dissecting these, it makes us as planners a little bit uncomfortable, and it should, because it means that we need to start thinking very differently about it. But I also picked up this topic of active citizenry, and I think it's a thread, and it probably will be a thread going through the next 3 days. So Dr. Sabina, thank you for those opening remarks. I just want to hand over to Mr. Ashraf Adam for his opening remarks, and then we will go to Mr. Joe Roberts. Mr. Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Good morning, everybody. I hope I meet your expectations in this conversation. For me, I've been grappling with the issue of planning and its future, actually. I suppose it's a perennial question people ask, but I've been reflecting on 30 years in the profession in the context of planning, really having had very little impact, and also the future of planning in terms of improving the quality of life of people and generally the world's citizens. And the reason for saying that is that if you look at the history of planning, it is actually the history of paradox. No, can't be the history of paradox. That if you look at the history of planning, you'll see paradoxes continuously emerging, because it is not without contradiction, and therefore there will be paradox. For me, if we start from the basis that planning is political, it is fundamentally political because it is a tool to meet the broader objectives of social and economic development. And therefore, who controls that process, who controls the politics of that process, controls planning. Thus, if a state is not in charge, unlike in the 30s and 40s and 50s, up until in the Soviet Union and other socialist countries until the 80s, if a state is not in charge of its politics and its governance systems, then it is not in charge of planning. Then other people are, or other interest groups are. And therefore, resource allocation in that context is going to favor those people who are in power. And there will always be the contest, because there becomes the paradox of those who are not in power and those who are in power and want to influence planning in their ways and the way they see the world. And I think that is important because unlike in the modernist era, up until the 70s and things like that, planning was largely controlled by the state, and the state was able to do what it wanted to do. And so you see the New Town movements, you see all kinds of changes across the world, and people then, and in that way, urban growth also was a very important part of economic policy. And as a result of that, you saw suburbanization, you saw cities changing, and all that other kind of stuff. So planning has moved from being a tool and an instrument determining markets of the dominant state to one of being reflexive and reactive, and is a tool in who controls the economy and therefore the spatial needs of that economy. And as we've seen over the last few years, over the last 20 to 30 years, there's been an increase in spatial inequality, which can then be linked to income and social inequality. And the planning profession across the world, architects and planners and urban designers, have contributed towards spatial inequality. And therefore, if you look at those inequalities across the world, and you layer new technologies over that, it's the people who have access to those technologies who then control the society and the cities and things like that. And therefore, because of inequality, those in charge, those with money, have access to those smart city technologies and things like that. And the application of that, you get to the point of technology promoting inequality. And if I could just as an aside say that every society, from the time before we invented the wheel, we've been using technologies available to us at the time. It's a contemporary tool. There's nothing fantastic or great about it. You use the tools for your own objectives. So the idea that we need to focus on the smart city is, I think, misplaced, actually. I think we need to re-look at that kind of situation. So for me, what we need to look at is the other paradox of whether we can refocus society towards clear objectives. And in that context, I think we need to begin to ask certain questions. In the context of the pandemic, is high density still something we want to talk about? Or are there other ways in which we can deal with densities other than the way we have been dealing with that now in terms of spatial structure? How do we deal with the generalized policies that have come about as a result of hyperglobalization? If you look at globalization, economic globalization, you can mirror global development policy from all the development agencies, whether it's all over the world. They're all saying the same thing, and they're all arguing for the same kind of spatial transformation, type of planning approaches and that kind of stuff. And I think that in the context of local specificities, I mean, globalization hasn't got to the point where we're all saying the same thing and talking the same thing and eating the same thing. We are still who we are as people. And who we are as people determine who we are in our planning spaces, in the spaces in which we occupy. And I think we need to begin to review our policies towards that. So while post-oil might be a big issue in certain parts of the world, I can tell you in South Africa, oil exploration and gas exploration is part of our economic policy. So post-oil in one part of the world, exploration in another part of the world, but if you look at the national, international and global policies, they're all the same. And I think to deal with those paradoxes, we need to go for more nationalized and less fewer global policies. Linked to that, is the absence of democratic participation, because we need to increase democratic participation if you want to review and reallocate resources. And in that context, we need to ask the questions which right-wingers used to ask in the 70s and 80s, and that is the issue of family size. Is there an issue in the case of global warming, resource depletion, high density living, the impact of high density living on mental health and violence and gender-based violence and so forth? So we need to begin to ask those questions, because it is paradox. Planning is generally considered to be the domain of the left and the left-leaning people, but the issues of family size and the issues of determined space are actually determined by people who are to the right, big capital, people who oppose family planning, people who oppose abortion, people who oppose a whole range of stuff, are actually people who influence the city a lot more than planners and other progressives do. And I think we need to engage in that. In other words, if you want to move planning from its current paradox towards other paradoxes, then I think we need to look at a few things. Systems of democratic accountability, more than participation. The responsiveness of local states to the outcomes of that accountability. The focus on basic and localized infrastructure, which might well not be high-tech, fourth industrial revolution, alternative technologies. You might find that something else applies in a particular local community, which is at odds with a national or an international policy. And I think we need to spend a lot more time in planning, understanding human well-being, because we talk glibly about a range of stuff related to whether it is technology, whether it is a more equitable planning and high density and all that. But if you look at the issues of mental health in cities and how that is accelerated and exposed by the pandemic, the pandemic didn't bring out the mental health issues. It showed up the mental health issues. And I think we need to begin to spend some time thinking about that. So those are just the only opening points I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashraf Adam, for those comments. And I think for me, what was the most interesting of all of them, and we've talked now over the past few months, Ashraf, you'll agree with me, we've actually placed planning practice in politics. And I think the last few webinars that we've held have done just that. They've located planning practice within politics. But interesting for me was the spatial and economic injustices that communities across the world are faced with. And when you layer that with technology, who actually has access to that city, or who actually has access to that kind of settlement? Is there not a sense of bias in terms of accessibility of that smart city? So a discussion around that going forward, I think, is definitely going to be very interesting. But also, again, the humanness of communities and their participation in democracy and a democratic government, and what does that actually mean for planning and planning practice? And more than that, the sense of human well-being. I think if COVID has taught us anything, one of the things that's probably going to stay with us for the rest of our lives is human well-being. It's the most prized possession. It's the currency that we are all trading in now. And how does that actually impact the work that we do as planners, and how do we contribute to human well-being? With that said, I want to invite Mr. Joe Ravitz from the UK. Mr. Ravitz, if you can please just give us some opening remarks, and then we will get into some further discussions. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you so much for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. Can I share my screen? Because some of you who know me already know that I like to think in pictures. I was once an architect and a builder, and the habit is still there to think in pictures. So, and you mentioned the theme of well-being. I think this is a theme which will run and run, as they say. Let's say everything is brought up to the surface by this COVID-19 thing, this pandemic. Not the world's first pandemic by any means, but it's maybe the world's first pandemic in which we are more connected across the world than ever before. The fact that we can have this conversation with 350 people is incredible, actually. So let's put that on the well-being balance. Now, the first thing is to say, okay, the future at the moment is like a cusp of unknowns, uncertainties. And what happens if the pandemic is solved? Or what happens if we don't solve it? The pandemic is ongoing for a number of very good reasons. At the moment, it's tending towards the right-hand side. And then we also say, as planners or as citizens, what do we want? Do we want society just to get back to how it was before? And there's many advantages to that. We know what to do, more or less. Or are we aiming for some kind of transition? Or will that transition happen? So you can see in one picture here, you have the return to shopping, and our government here in the UK was very keen to get people shopping again, going to restaurants, all this. So there you see a shopping mall with the traditional line of trolleys and the line of beggars and homeless people just underneath the flyover. This is more or less an accurate picture of Manchester at the moment. And then what about the opposite corner? We can adapt to anything if we have to. So we put everything in glass bubbles, which are highly screened and conditioned and so on. Even the dogs, as you can see, are in their little bubbles. Life could go on if it has to. The dogs might not like it so much, but they will get used to it. And then this is what we see in many places around the world, the lockdown city. This is then an open door for the people, the security companies, the paramilitaries, the builders of fences and walls and so on. And of course, if you don't like it, well, that's tough. They will take you away. And then perhaps some of us might still aspire to a situation where the pandemic is solved. And we can go partying in the streets, just like we used to. But it will actually be better because the pandemic has helped us to solve some of the huge problems of structural inequality and exploitation and so on and so on. And while we're at it, yes, we can do climate change, we can do resource depletion and so on and so on. Why not? Let's be positive. So these are very, very different alternative futures. And then the big question is, okay, can we make a difference? Are these part of our agency? Are they in the planners, toolkits or things to do? Well, these are huge questions, which I can only touch on for a couple of minutes. Here, more will be discussed in the session tomorrow afternoon, I think. So then we say, okay, let's observe some of the immediate effects from what is going on. Whether or not the pandemic is solved, next week or in 10 years, who knows? But we can see already the map of the city is being redrawn, not in buildings, but in the way that people use it and the access that people have, and particularly the safety that people enjoy or not. So here you see different building types, urban types, in terms of where people live, high value, high safety. I'm very lucky, I live here in a relatively, safe place, I have a garden with a shed, and so on and so on. All the way over to low value, low safety, where people not far from here are living in high density with very little protection. They have to go out to work, to drive taxis or whatever it is, and the effects are very destructive. There's a similar story in terms of what people do. Consumer services, and we can start to be, systematic and type these out and analyze and do spatial analysis and so on. So this is just a cartoon sketch, the beginning of something. All the way through to hospitals, universities, and factories, and so on and so on. I work at a university, which is everything's online, but actually it is a state of meltdown. I have no idea if this model of a university with a campus will be there in a couple of years' time. So following through, we say, okay, there is a kind of matrix at work here, safety versus value. Up to now, planners more or less, well, in this part of the world, not others maybe, but we more or less took for granted the issue of safety. Now we have to build it into the calculus, which is not to say this solves the problem. It makes it double or triple the size, actually, because safety, again, is a political issue. It's about resources and support from the state. And do we pay taxi drivers to not drive a taxi but stay in isolation? Do we give them somewhere to be isolated? And so on. And the resources needed to do this, the economic resources, are beyond anything which we dreamed of. At the moment here in this country, we have one of the most right-wing governments for a long time, pursuing one of the most left-wing redistributionary policies for a long time. And what the hell is going on? But this is where we're at. This is an age of paradoxes. Anyway, so then following through, we say, okay, well, can people adapt? Let's just go for a walk around the city. And here you see a bit of a cartoon walk. Future versions will be, fully animated. So this is just like a storyline. And in the middle, it all looks very dangerous. Whatever you do, oh my God, I touched a light switch, I'm going to be infected. I walked down those stairs and I touched the ground, the rail, or I'm breathing somebody's space, on the bus, and so on. And then we say, well, so what could people do using the natural ingenuity of everybody concerned, including planners, urban designers, urban infrastructure providers, and so on, whose job it is to make all this easier if they could only just coordinate and get the hang of it. So, well, there are ideas here that this comes from a kind of, workshop which we had in the early days. It should be updated on a daily basis. And then we look at, well, for so many years, not all the time through the short history of planning, but in recent decades, the whole point of planning was to get people together, to mix, to interact, to be dense and vibrant, and go to bars and, and colleges and so on. Now we find the opposite is taking place. We have a disturbanism of distance. And instead of social networks, we have social not works, where people are not working. What do? How do they fulfill their lives? And so on. Instead of colleges with campuses, we have a Zoom university, and so on and so on. It's worth reflecting that planning, in many ways, was born out of previous public health crises, in the mid-19th century. Cholera and TB and so on were the great killers. And at that point, planners, and I myself was deeply involved in the Garden City philosophy 100 years later. They said, oh, let's get people out of the big, bad, polluted city into the green fields. Great. And here's a model for how to do it. And here's an economic model for how to do it, and even a political model. And this had a great effect. So now we have to start maybe reinventing such things. Now, again, we can come up with wacky ideas. At first people said, hands-free shopping, how would you do that? Do we all dress in hazmat suits and then the drone puts the stuff in our basket or something? Well, yeah, why not? If that's what we have to do to get through. But beyond that, it's a massive opportunity for rethinking well-being, for ecological sustainability, for integration of smart technology with human smartness or wisdom, and so on and so on. Each of these is a long, long story. I'll just put up one analytical thing, which again we'll come to tomorrow, which is say, okay, let's start to analyze what is going on in the different departments of planning. We could also contrast the UK experience so far. We're hoping to learn from...
Mr. Roberts, I hate to interrupt you. It's not part of my South African heritage to do that, but we do have a major time constraint. So if I would just give you a minute or two just to wrap up, and then we will just move forward. Thank you.
Then we look for responses to each of these, both directly in the next weeks and months, and then what are we really trying to achieve? And that, of course, is a long story, but here's a couple of ideas. And if we look at a neighborhood on the left, everything has gone wrong, it's polluted, it's dangerous, and so on. And now you have COVID everywhere. What can we hope to dream of, to aspire to, and so on? So these are just little snapshots. And then for the people here who I guess are mainly planners, we say, okay, how do we do this? How do we change the game where planners are basically serving the agents of profit and extraction of value into a game where well-being is the top of the list? Now, again, long story. I can only say if you want to find out more, come to the session tomorrow, or there's a book which tries to explain some of these things, and I'll stop there. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Rabbit. And again, I must apologize for cutting you short. There was no intention in that. We do have quite a bit to get through. Colleagues, we are about 5 minutes to closure of this session, and there's been a lot of discussion in the chat box. But there are a few themes that have come across. So delegates are chatting about density and the future of density in planning, but also around policy issues and also around smart cities. And does a smart city necessarily mean a city that's technologically equipped? So those are the generic themes that are running through the chat box. Due to time, we don't have time to allow delegates to actually pose their questions. But what I would like to wrap up with, so we've seen now, and Mr. Rabbit has given us a picture of planning, you know, and he said that planning has actually been born in crisis. And I want to find out what kind of planning and what kind of planner is going to be birthed during this time of COVID. You know, what are the characteristics of a COVID planner, if we call it that? And what are some of the tools that planners now need to go forward and to plan better cities and human settlements and communities? We've, over the past 40 minutes, we've had a discussion of where the gaps are in planning. We've also seen where the opportunities are in planning. But what are the tools and what are the characteristics that we as planners need to take our communities forward? Dr. Sabina, if I can just hand over to you quite quickly in a minute or two, if you can just give us a sense of what you think are the qualities and some of the tools that are required by planners. Thank you.
So I think the qualities, first of all, are, and many of us who also do research, I guess, know this idea of being appreciative in approach. I think there's a lot about that. I think there's a lot about perhaps relying less on textbooks and what we've all studied very well as generic planning, and understanding that actually context is really, really important, that we have to respond and engage with what actually is around us. And so that sounds very simple, but I think is actually very difficult for very many of us. I think that's an important tool. That includes, in addition to appreciation, the ability to engage. So we use these words, co-design, co-produce. I think Joe is showing us some really beautiful examples about how we can begin to evolve the kinds of methods and tools that allow us to work differently with people. And then maybe just the last comment, I'm the first one, even though I do come from a tech background, I'm the first one to agree that smart cities aren't about technology, but I do think technology in the times we're in is I mean, we've got to engage with it on some level. So and tomorrow I'll present a little bit about the framework Cities Network proposes, which does say that on some basic level, we do need to be enabled and have the competence to deal with data and to deal with technologies that are available to make things more efficient, that are real in our space. I just don't think that's what the city is about. But I do think the tech is an ingredient that planners do need to be able to make sense of.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sabina. Mr. Adam, some closing remarks from you, but also just a reflection.
I think we've got two opportunities. The first opportunity is to sit back and take a deep breath. And that recognize that development and planning and all these things are long-term. That the state as we know it is probably about 10,000 years old. And planning is probably around that. And if you look at the age of human civilization, it's longer than that. And that we have a long way to go. And I think that if we become anxious about having that change now or in 5 years or in 2 years, we are always going to set ourselves up for failure. The second opportunity, I think, is in that context to say, look, what is possible at the lowest possible level? What are the small and baby steps we can take to bring about the change that we'd like to see? And often it's those small things and those small successes that will make bring significant changes. So I think if we can just just adopt those two positions, we'll be okay.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Ravitz, if you have some closing comments.
One thing in particular is on my mind, which is to say, actually, we need more planners because the planners we want to be social workers, designers, community developers, social entrepreneur, advisors, and so on and so on. And at the moment, well, in my part of the world, these people are all in different departments all over the town hall, and actually the town hall is desperately short of money and closing things down faster than it opens up. And so the idea I'd like to just put on the table is to say, okay, we need a way to bring on the public, the citizens, the communities into this fold to enable them to do planning, to do organisation of community facilities or of community activities, or even, you know, very local infrastructure and so on. In some places this works. Here in Manchester, we have a scheme for training members of the community to then, you know, speak with government and providers of services in a more informed and productive way. So this kind of intermediary mentoring of urban development and rural, by the way, and development, enterprise, mobilization of all human resources. In my view, this is the only way to go. Yes, we need more planners, but we don't have any money to pay, you know, professional planners more. So sorry, guys, you know, but this, I think, is more about a mobilization of society as a whole, in which the discipline of planners may play a very catalytic role. We can't do it all ourselves, but we can enable and catalyze. So that's my thought for the day.
Thank you so much. So there's quite a tall order for planners, but if I just sum it up, planners must be everything, and they must be the jack of all trades, and they must do their best where they are with what they have. Colleagues, thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you for the opportunity to facilitate this discussion. And I hope that we've set a tone for the next 2 days, 2.5 days. And I wish you all well, and I hope that we will have great deliberations in the coming couple of hours. Thank you so much. Over to you, Fortune.
Thank you very much, Prashina, for that very informative session. Wow. I think if anything has to be said is that a thought has really been planted in all our minds. Prashina, I love that closing remark. Planners have got to be everything. I think planners have got to be Superman at some point and Superwoman. You guys just got to always be creating innovative ways to do the job that you do best. Also, one of the things that I really took away, man, it's that planners or planning is born in crisis. I think with the opening remarks that are made to initially open our conference, it was very important that I outlined that, and it sinks very much when it comes up towards the end of our discussion for this first session, that it is indeed during the crisis and the most difficult times that planners and planning is done, and some of the world's great inventions are established. And we've seen all around the world where the world is in turmoil and crisis, that is when planners are really needed the most. So just in case if you're a planner, you are demotivated and you are thinking that, man, it's just another job, I'm doing my job. I want to encourage you here and tell you that you are important, you are relevant. Without you, we wouldn't have the marvel and the road infrastructures and the things that are amazing that when we look around us, we see a life that has been made easy. It is by no accident that planners are the ones that are leading the way. Remember, I told you it was during the Great Depression in 1929, which lasted some years. And seemingly the COVID-19 is not going anywhere. It's still going to be around. The question is, as planners, are we going to sit on the sideline and wait for it to be over? Or are we going to continue implementing during the difficulty? If in 1929, the American Empire State Building was built during a state of depression, hardship, and difficulty. I believe even now, during COVID-19, there can be implementation beyond what we have seen. We have what it takes, and we can definitely do more with what we have. Also, I encourage you very much, colleagues, to drop comments, be participating in everything that is happening. Also, most importantly, as we're going to break away to the second session, I want to encourage you to check on our chat wherever you are. Check the chat. It is being uploaded, the different rooms which we're going to be breaking away into for the second session. Make sure that you go and click the link and go into the room of your choice. As you have been told, there are 3 rooms that have been allocated. Yes, it is room 1, which is Smart Cities and 4IR. Room 2, it's a spatial planning across the globe. And room 3 is a COVID-19 in planning. Remember, when we finish the session in planning on the second, when we finish that second session in our rooms, you just have to go back and click on the main link, and then you're going to come back to the main room, which is this one. But before we end off our first session, I just want us all to give a round of applause to all those who participated, the speakers, for just making sure that they were keeping to time. We are on time. Just give them a round of applause wherever you are. They did quite a great job. All right. You know, it's very important that we cannot end the session without having a proper closing. So we're going to allow an amazing lady, Professor Hope, who's going to come here, Hangwelani Hope Mademisha. Excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong. Please correct me. I'm willing to learn how to pronounce it right. So it's Hangwelani Hope Mademisha, Professor Hangwelani Hope Mademisha. Correct me when you do come to the front. She's going to come and do our morning session closing for us, and just, you know, to appreciate the morning session and how it has gone so far. She is, what you need to know is that she is an NRF-rated researcher and a South African Researchers Chairs Initiative Chair for cities. She is indeed holding quite an important role, and she plays a very important part in our society. And I invite her to do our closing for this morning session.
Thank you, Fortunate, and thank you for all the colleagues who managed to attend this function. I just, by way of introduction, I just think I need to reflect on what I've been doing for over a decade. I spent a decade trying to understand why developmental plans that we have, they're normally not implemented. As a result of that, it was coming from the fact that I've looked across, chat with colleagues from different disciplines, from different parts of the country, different parts of the globe, and all of them, they did indicate some concern around implementation of developmental plans that built environment experts come up with. Then, of course, some of them, they come up with different reasons why that is the case, and those reasons are different from one country to another, from one continent to another. And this is how this theme of this function was decided on, so that we can learn from each other, we can learn from different people from different countries across the globe, and learn from different experiences. So having said that, whether the reasons are the same or not, the point is some plans in some instances are not being implemented. And if they're not being implemented, this is the discussion that we need to have. And that's why we have invited people from different countries, from different continents, to come and talk to us about their experience. So the next couple of days, which is about 2.5 days, we'll be looking at those issues, and we're hoping that we'll come up with some interesting discussions and solutions. This morning, the panels and the presenters already set the norm, already set the pace for what to expect in the next coming days. I just want to make some few reflections on what Dr. Gaishiev said when she started her presentation, when she made some reflection on what is smart cities. And can we really afford to be smart? Those are some of the real questions that we need to start asking ourselves as planners, as urban experts, as the built environment expert going forward, because These words are used very often, but the question is, do we really understand what the meaning of that and how do we put that into practice? Mr. Adam also raised some very interesting discussions around planning being politics, to say, as planners, we are operating in a political space, and who's really in charge of our plans? To what extent does that actually influence our implementation? Those are some of the questions that we need to take with when going to the next session and try to ask serious questions around those issues. How do we implement if planning really is politics and politics is power? So who got power? And of course, Mr. Ravet also made some very interesting observation and reflecting on the issue we have right now in terms of the COVID. And key to what he noted is the issue around how planning as a profession itself come about. It emerged in terms as a response to a crisis, to respond to issues that need some kind of thinking and planning around it. Now, these issues, all these issues, they are going to be taken further into the next rooms and in the following couple of days. And of course, we have also heard from our speakers, ISOCOP, where they are also saying that this discussion is going to take over or further. We're going to engage with this in the next presentations or in the ISOCOP conference, which is going to start on the 8th of November. So I just want to thank everyone for coming here today and the response that we have from all the delegates, from the panelists, from the organizers, and of course, fortunately, you have been doing some very great work and keeping us all engaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Madamisha. What an amazing remark as well. I believe all of us colleagues, we have been challenged. We now have been given a thought to think about as we are breaking away for our break now. I want to leave you with one thought, my parting shot. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of something called the Belgian horse. There's something called the Belgian horse. The Belgian horse is the strongest mammal in the planet. As it is the strongest mammal in the planet, the Belgian draft horse is used to get logs on its back, and some of them, they've even went to a point where they train them. So one Belgian horse, if it is untrained, it can pull up to 8,000 pounds. That is untrained on its own. But when it is trained, it can pull up to 16,000 pounds. Marveling. And I did a little bit more research around that. I wanted to find out what exactly is this about. And I discovered that that very same Belgian draft horse, if you train two of them together, when they are untrained, they can pull 24,000 pounds. But when they are trained and raised together, nurtured and grown and measured together, they can pull up to right up to 34,000 pounds, two of them. What am I saying by this? I believe that, colleagues, if we work as a unit, we can pull twice the weight of changing the world as we see, as we are. Because at the end of the day, we look at ourselves as different people from different walks of life and different spaces. But I want to tell you, we are one. We are the universe, meaning one. If we can work together as planners, we can implement the greatest inventions. We can create some of the world's marvelous things. I want to say to you as we break off here, take this and think about it. We need to work as one. And when we are united, we become unstoppable. There's a quote, an African proverb that I love very much. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And as a unit, I believe we can conquer and we can achieve a lot more. All right now we're going to take our break from the first session. So the session is indeed adjourned. The second session is going to kickstart at 2 p.m., 1400 hours South African Johannesburg time. We're going to be back here on the chat and we're going to kick off the second session. Remember, On the second session, the most important part is we are going to be going into our breakout rooms, which are being listed right here on the chat. You will see on the side of the screen in the chat. Please make sure you go there, you click on the room that you desire to be in, and make sure you participate in that room. Room 1 is smart cities and 4IR. Room 2 is spatial planning across the globe. And room 3 is COVID-19 in planning. Make sure you remember that as you take your break. Go out there, enjoy your lunch, but remember, we are back here at 1400 hours South African Johannesburg time. Thank you very much. The first session is adjourned.
Durban is ready to host you. Discover Durban adventures and tranquility. Re-energize and put fun back in your life. Take a tour to Ushaga Marine with the biggest aquarium in the Southern Hemisphere. Play on the Durban's Golden Run. Experience fun getaways for family and friends on safari with quad biking and zip lining. Explore Durban cultural diversity, from township and heritage experience to fine dining. Durban has so much more to offer. Enjoy luxury leisure while staying safe and adhering to all COVID-19 regulations in all our places. Durban, the warmest place to be.
Wanna make it last with you.